Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Teeny Tiny Summit today. We're so happy that you can join us on this. I don't know where you are in Ontario, but where I'm in Ontario, it's a pretty rainy. I just had a very wet dog come in and say hello to me as I was just ready to start. She came in from her morning chores. So my name's Carolyn Peterborough, and I, along with my colleague Karen Fisher, will be moderating today's Teeny Tiny Summit. And we're part of a small but mighty team from OMAFR's Community Economic Development area. And we're really passionate about bringing opportunities for teeny tiny places to life. So we've been delivering teeny tiny summits since 2016, and we've been partnering with the Rural Ontario Municipal Association to help deliver these sort of scale appropriate workshops for small communities that share practical examples, lessons learned. Today's topic is, how does diversity, equity, and inclusion support community economic development? So when we started thinking about topics, we talked about as communities, economic developers, volunteers, organizations, as you focus on economic recovery, applying that diversity, equity, and inclusion framework can be important for growth. It can help build long-term resilience for communities. And I always think about, I've shared this story internally within our branch. I remember driving around with one of our deputy or assistant deputy ministers a number of years ago, and he said, Carolyn, when I started working at OMAFRA, we were all the same. We all had the same degree from Guelph. We all looked the same. We came from sort of similar type backgrounds. And he goes, what we have learned is we're so much stronger when we have diversity within the people who work within OMAFRA. And the same happens in communities. We have such incredible diversity, whether it's diversity of age, diversity of language, diversity of backgrounds, experience, educations. So we have that ability to look at, from an economic development perspective, how can we create stronger, more resilient local economies? And this session today will explore those ways in which communities are investing in diversity, creating a culture of equity, and removing those barriers for inclusion. So we're happy you could join us. I can see people are logging in as we join, and I'm going to begin our session with land acknowledgement. So I'm grateful to live and work on the lands of the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Scugog Island First Nation. I'm a settler in Canada, and like all settlers, I have benefited from colonialism. My ancestors were of Mennonite heritage, and in 1807, they left Pennsylvania. They crossed into what is now Ontario to seek an existence that was really more aligned with their Mennonite values. They settled initially in the Markham area and then made their home in Altona, which is a small village in the north end of what is now Pickering Township. And this was around the early 1850s. At the time of my ancestors' settlement, it was the Mississaugas who inhabited the north shore of Lake Ontario, including even where my home is now. A decade or so before my ancestors settled in Canada, the Governor Simcoe ordered that Whitby, Pickering, and 10 other townships be declared open for settlers. And records indicate there were about 800 settlers living in the township of Pickering in 1825. This area was heavily wooded. My ancestors started what would be a farming legacy that has stretched 8 generations to this day. So although the federal government's plan for a second Toronto airport in the 1970s ended, my personal residence of that particular land, I can't help to think back to those early 1800s and what were the interactions between my ancestors and the Mississaugas. The removal of forest for farmland would have removed the habitat for game and for hunting ground for the Mississaugas, who really roamed that swath of land between Lake Ontario and the Oak Ridges Moraine. And they lived off the land and the water, and that would have led to a permanent change in how they would live. I think about that often, and I think about how I might, in my actions, either personally or professionally, respond to or somehow return the balance to what I've benefited from, and those who do not have the same privileges. As going back to where that land my ancestors settled on, it was surveyed in 1791, but the Williams Treaty was not signed until 1923. So to give you a bit of an idea of the amount of time it took to have the discussions and have the Williams treaties of those 7 First Nations, including those Mississaugas of the North Shore of Lake Ontario. As a settler, I've begun the journey to learn about those negative and unforgivable impacts colonialism have had and really continue to have on Indigenous people. This land acknowledgement will serve as a reminder of the past and the ongoing harms of residential schools and colonialism, and I have and will continue to explore what reconciliation looks like in my life and how I can create a life that incorporates reconciliation's actions regularly and consistently. Just take a moment to go through some virtual meeting etiquette. Because we have a lot of people on the line today, we'll ask that you try to remain muted unless you're speaking at that time. And if you are speaking, just be mindful of background noise. Position your camera properly. You're welcome to have your cameras on. We're really happy when people turn their cameras on and can see who else is in the room. If you have questions for the speakers, you're welcome to type those into the chat, and between some of the OMAFRA staff on, we'll pull those out and we'll make sure the moderator of each session has those questions. And you're welcome to also share your experiences or ideas in the chat as well. I'll just share the agenda with you today to set the stage. As I said earlier around Teeny Tiny, I talked about why we do Teeny Tinies and what our goals are for Teeny Tinies. But today we will have our welcome. We've done our welcome and land acknowledgement. I will be introducing Pam Saini shortly from Roma to give some greetings. We have our first session is why DEI matters in community economic development, and my colleague Karen Fisher will be speaking to that. And then we have 4 community guests who will be talking about what DEI looks like in their communities and how it impacts economic development. So we've got a full agenda as always, and we have some teeny tiny snapshots that if we have time, we will be sharing that at the end. So I'm just going to pass it over to my colleague, Karen Fisher. Karen's going to share a remembrance of somebody that we've lost recently.
Thanks, Carolyn. We wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge that one of our very staunch supporters, community member Brian Grattan, who was the Economic Development Officer with the City of Quinte West, he passed away on Monday afternoon. And we are incredibly saddened to learn this. And I wanted to say that, you know, we at OMAFRA in Community Economic Development have worked with Brian over many years. First in his role with Havelock, Belmont, Methuen, and more recently with the City of Quinte West. He was a champion of many of our CED programs and especially of Teeny Tiny Summits, and was always such a pleasure to work with. He accomplished great things in the communities he served, both personally and professionally. He exemplified community development, and he was a lovely, genuine, always smiling, respectful, and committed person. It was an honor and a privilege to work with you, Brian. Rest in peace. You will be missed by all those whose lives you've touched.
Thank you, Karen. I had the pleasure of seeing Brian last at the Ontario Business Improvement Area Association AGM, and he went to support his BIAs and learn about some of the best practices in the province about downtown improvement areas. So it was such a shock to learn that yesterday. Thank you for that tribute, Karen. I am now happy to invite Pam Saini to the screen, and Pam's going to bring some greetings from Roma.
Thank you, Carolyn. And I just have to also say thank you for that heartfelt land acknowledgement as well, and the personalizing of it. And I think it encourages all of us to begin to personalize these land acknowledgements. So thank you again for that. The work that you and Karen do is so heartfelt in the communities. You demonstrate in your presentations and in our discussions how committed you are to our rural areas, and we are all benefiting that across Ontario. So thank you. I'm Pam Saney, Councillor of the Township of Minden Hills and a member of the Rural Ontario Municipalities Association Board. Roma has been a proud sponsor of the Teeny Tiny Summits for a number of years. And for the past few years, I've had the opportunity to be the liaison and working with Omafra on this. Living and working in rural communities, I have the daily opportunity to experience and reflect on the changes, innovations, and creative passion to promote community. Hearing from and sharing with other rural communities helps us find common concerns and, most importantly, solutions in our changing world. It helps us in building resilience and inclusive communities. It helps us identify important aspects of our rural communities in Ontario as we interface with the changing large cities in our province and areas. So this has been very important to all of us. I've been so impressed with the people, projects, and passions that have been coming to Teeny Tiny Summits and sharing their information with us. The conversations that these summits provide are not only critical to the planning for the future of rural communities, but they are also extremely inspiring. So I have to encourage people that are online to invite your neighbors, invite other counselors, invite those that you work with to attend, because I think that's how we get the ongoing conversations going on these topics, which is greatly appreciated. So you remind us of the benefits and beauty of living and working and growing in rural Ontarios, and you highlight all the amazing possibilities for us. I'm particularly looking forward to today's discussion on exploring how diversity and equity and inclusion supports community economic development. And I'm looking forward to hearing our panelists today and learning from their on-the-ground experiences. And I want to thank Omafra again, Carolyn and Karen, for the great job in putting Teeny Tiny Summits together. The research that you do and the expertise you bring together is beyond none. So let me just introduce the panelists today. And I'm going to introduce them in the order that they'll be speaking. First of all, Hilary Guinaud is the Director of Corporate Services for the Municipality of North Grenville. Two of her current files include DIA and assisting in the creation of an economic development strategy, and she will share her community's experience in these areas. And second will be Mark Noakes, is the local immigration partnership manager at the County of Huron, and will share the work they have been doing to share stories of business owners in Huron County and how those are helping to increase the visibility about the diverse populations living in Huron County. And next, we'll hear from Jimmy Coate, who is the Chief Administrative Officer of the Municipality of Val Rita Hardy. Jimmy works closely with the mayor, council, and with staff to ensure council's goals and objectives are achieved. Val Rita Hardy is embedded they have embedded DEI within their strategic plan. We're always using acronyms, so we all know what DEI means: diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you. And finally, AJ Adams is a communications professional and social change advocate with the passion and focus on rural 2S LGBTQIA+ advocacy. AJ provides his knowledge, skills, and lived experience to community organizations, including as president of Stratford Perth Pride and other volunteer organizations. So very exciting of everybody here today and to hear from them. And I'll pass this back over to Karen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam, for that those words. And thank you to Roma again for your support, because without you, we wouldn't be here today. So thank you so much for that. And I'm going to move into, we're going to have a facilitated conversation And I'm going to share with you some of the what OMAFRA CED, Community Economic Development, sorry Pam, acronyms, and just talk a little bit about why DEI matters in community economic development, and sort of what actions and activities that we're undertaking. And then part of this is going to be an activity, and I'm hoping that you're going to enjoy the technology as much as we do. It's very straightforward, so please don't be nervous. But it's a really great tool that we found to have these kinds of conversations. So the outline for the session, I'm going to talk a little bit about the summer student project that we had this past year, like in 2022, and some of the findings from that project. Then we're going to have that open discussion, and then what I'd like to wrap up with is just what OMAFRA Community Economic Development Unit is doing with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion moving forward. And, you know, a lot of it resulting from what we learned this summer. So I'd like to start off just by talking about, excuse me, we, you know, you see, like, you know, if you Google diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, you're going to see all kinds of definitions that pop up. And what we wanted to do, this was one that particularly resonated for us, and we wanted to share it with you, and realizing that there are a lot of words on the screen, but you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion are really important to understand conceptually before, you know, we can really seriously commit and dig into the subject and adopt that framework, as Carolyn mentioned earlier. So just to go through really quickly, diversity includes all the ways that people differ. And it could be, you know, in many different ways. It could be race, ethnicity, gender. It includes age, national origin, religion, disability, sexual orientation, you know, and the list goes on. And, you know, Carolyn spoke to that change in diversity that we're seeing in OMAFRA over time. And, you know, it's really rewarding to see and to embrace new colleagues with different perspectives. And this definition also includes diversity of thought. And I think we all understand clearly how important it is that we have that diversity. We recognize that diversity as well. And there are lots of folks who identify with multiple identities. So let's talk about equity. So understanding diversity. So it's that, you know, that you've probably heard the expression, it's who's around the table. And then equity is that fair treatment, fair access, and opportunity for all. So that there are no barriers to everyone, no matter what their affiliation, that they are able to fully participate. And I think we talk about that a lot in our own organizations, just with respect to systems that are in place that perhaps have created barriers for some folks to thrive. So, you know, taking a look at equity from that perspective, and again, making sure that we understand what it is. And you really, you know, as we go and look at each of these words and what they mean, you really can't have one without the other. To have a fulsome, to build a fulsome framework. And inclusion is the act of creating environments in which individuals or groups of individuals can feel welcome, can be welcomed, respected, supported, included, and valued. So, you know, it's really, really important that we're not just, you know, applauding ourselves because we have a diverse group of people around our table, but making sure that they have equal opportunity, and then also making sure that they feel like they can fully participate and do belong is really, really important. And, you know, when you think about why, you know, it like philosophically, you think about why. And so there are a number of different ways that, you know, why we need to adopt that DEI framework. As we move forward in our economic development efforts, and as we move forward in our community development efforts, that we you know, bear this in mind and be authentic to building a framework and living, eating, breathing that framework. So, you know, there's a you know, sort of the moral case for the why, that every person has value, and that where there are barriers that exist, we need to address those barriers and historical factors that exist. We need to address those and find ways to work through those. There's an economic case that, you know, the more diversity we have, we are going to have a broader range of talent in our communities, of people who bring different skill sets, and that our residents and businesses and community organizations are stronger because of incorporating DEI. And again, you know, we will better, all of us, no matter, you know, whether we represent ourselves and our family, an organization or a business, or our municipality, or in our case, the province, you know, we will better serve our customers, clients, the people around us, if they reflect the diversity of our community and region. And then the results case is that diverse teams and communities will lead to better outcomes. So now what I want to talk about is like, so what does this mean for us? And I want to talk a little bit about our why and how we got into this project in the first place. And so we've been very actively involved, you know, I would say, like, well, through COVID, you know, in monitoring what's happening at the local level, you know, from a community standpoint, from a business standpoint, from a, you know, like labor standpoint, et cetera. And, you know, we've seen over that time, and of course it was exacerbated by COVID, but a lot of these things have been happening in our communities, just not at the same rate. And so, you know, some of the things that we saw is that we've seen that influx of newcomers to rural areas. We've seen an increased need for knowledge and awareness raising in communities because of the change of you know, sort of that demographic in our communities. Recognizing that newcomers bring a wealth of knowledge, skills, assets, energy, innovative ideas, and diversity to our communities. You know, there's an argument for youth retention as well, in that, you know, it's really like, regardless of again, you know, their affiliation, for them, for many youth, it's the right thing to do, and they want to be in a community where diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the subsequent belonging happens. You know, there's that growing need for communities to be welcoming and inclusive, and not just because we have workforce challenges, but also because we want people to come here and to love it here. I say here, I live in a small rural community that has experienced all of this. And we want to ensure that anybody who comes here feels that social connectedness and belonging. And then the other thing is, you know, we want to support their needs as entrepreneurs and members of the workforce. So, you know, a lot of our economic development focus has been on inviting newcomers to our communities and inviting them to start businesses, to be residents in our communities. But we also need to look more broadly at that social connectedness and belonging piece. We can't really, as I said earlier, we can't really have one without the other. Or, you know, diversity, equity, or inclusion. It's, you know, we need to have all of it. And so, you know, because we're CED, we're community economic development, and part of our role is to, you know, stay relevant with our tools and resources. It's something that we wanted to take a deeper dive into. So, sorry, it took me a long time to get to this. And so we had a summer student come in and just to look at what's happening in rural communities, and also to, you know, look at how we can provide some support to communities on their DEI journey. So the project was led by an analyst. A jurisdictional scan was performed. Data was gathered on best practices in DEI across Ontario, and we used online outreach and focused follow-up interviews. So I'm going to give you some really basic stats. 30% have DEI embedded in policy of the folks we heard from. 17.5% undertake DEI initiatives. So just very broadly, it gives you a sense of you know, some laying some of that where people are at. So one of the questions that we talked about was, you know, what's holding you back? And some of the things that people reported on were things like funding, organizational will, knowledge and skill sets, comfort level, and resistance from non-conforming groups. Other findings included that data was really important to understand the, you know, sort of that makeup of your community. Education and awareness for leadership is paramount. Community champions are required. And there was also conversation from a number of folks around incentivizing funding programs to be inclusive. And you know, one other thing that we did observe is that there's often a disconnect between, you know, some of the grassroots equity-seeking folks and groups and the municipal government, and you know, they're not necessarily in the same place. So there were some really interesting findings, and it's given us a lot of food for thought. And I'm going to talk a little bit sort of on the other end of our facilitated conversation about what our next steps are, and the things that we'd like to do moving forward. So we wanted to engage the group online to share with us a little bit about you know, what are you doing in your own community? And we're using a tool called RetroBoard, and you can either scan the QR code that's on the screen, or there, maybe Carolyn, you could pop the link in the chat in case people need to go that route. And basically, when we get to when you click on the link, there are 4 questions in there, and you'll be able to just click on the you know, the plus sign at the top under each question, and add your comments and suggestions and ideas under that, and we'll be able to see in real time how that is developing. So I'm hoping, are we able to bring that up on the screen?
Yeah, I just have to stop and then I'll pull it up because the way I shared. So we'll do that, okay?
Yeah. So, you know, I think one of the things I'd also like to say is that you know, this is hard, hard for a lot of people and a lot of organizations and a lot of communities, and just, you know, not really knowing where to start or where to go from here. And so, you know, maybe that's one place that, you know, where in particular we'd like to hear from others on things that have really worked for you, and also, you know, that's perhaps an area where we can provide some support as OMAFRA moving forward. You know how much we love planning. So anyway, just wanting to share that, and thank you for your input so far. I'm seeing, well, you know what, I'm gonna have to open this on myself actually.
Can you see it shared on the screen right now?
I can, yes.
Okay, perfect.
And if you're not comfortable using the retro board, you know, feel free to type your comments and thoughts in the chat as well, because, you know, we'll be monitoring that too.
And you're welcome. If you want, you can just private message me if you want, and I can just share it if you don't want it attributed to yourself. Yes, I can put the QR code back up. Just 1 second. There. Do we see the QR code again? We do. Sorry about that.
There's some really great stuff coming up up here. And yeah.
There we go. I've got that sharing it again.
Okay. So, you know, under, you know, sharing an action or activity that, you know, your community or organization or you yourself have undertaken, you know, EDI roundtables, you know, and that's something that I think a lot of communities have undertaken, is having diversity, equity, and inclusion committees, and perhaps in some of the larger communities having DEI, someone, you know, on staff who is focused on DEI, or someone on staff who, you know, it's one of the many hats that they wear. A welcoming community, starting a welcoming community group in a municipality. Starting organizations, grassroots LGBTQIA organization in the community, and various events, education and training that are being held. Lots of great ideas here. Oh, AMO has a We All Win campaign, and I'm anxious to hear more about that. Oh, and okay, Train the Trainer program, developing local facilitators of workshops and training. Great idea. So, you know, lots of really great ideas being shared here. Factors contributing to success, engaging 12 municipalities, that's huge. And, you know, having them speak to their own experiences. Oh, having a written plan. Yes, yay. We like having a written plan. Finding ways to celebrate and explore culture in a low stakes way. One of the communities that we spoke with indicated that what they did was worked very closely with their library and with their local grocer, and just to ensure that you know, there was a variety of food available for newcomers, and as well that the library had you know, appropriate books and programming and so on. So I thought that was a really great way to for the municipality to take the lead on some things. Accountability and measurement. Yes, funding, absolutely. So, and barriers. Concerned about doing the wrong thing or not broad-based actions. That's, wow, we've heard that a lot. Afraid to misspeak and say something wrong. Lack of education and resistance to learning from residents. Oh, yes. Yes, council being on board, yes, these are things we've all heard. And housing shortages, yes, there are not places for people to live. A simple resistance to having uncomfortable conversations. So, you know, one of the things that just concerned about doing the wrong thing, or not broad-based actions, or afraid to misspeak, or, you know, lack of you know, feeling like a discomfort. You know, I've used the analogy of how do you eat an elephant, and it's, you know, one bite at a time, right? And I think that with diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's really important to take that first step, and or, you know, take the next step. And, you know, whether it's like, this is a space I think that we're never going to be, I want to say that we're never really going to be comfortable. And so, you know, I think it's really important that we find some comfort in our discomfort and just take those steps. And, you know, that's something that I've learned over time in my learning and the work that I do, both personally and professionally. You know, just that you're never going to lose that sense of discomfort, but we need to take that first step or take the next step, even if we're not feeling ready. So tools and resources helpful to you: workshops, positive space training, book clubs. Yeah, absolutely. Workshops and trainings, again, education, including post-secondary institutions. Great idea. We have a very active group here in the Quinte region, and you know, again, grassroots, but doing some great work in bringing newcomers and residents together. Mandatory training for municipal employees, yes, absolutely. Engaging students and young people in creating spaces. These are all such really great ideas, and I think they are sort of common denominators that we can all work through, perhaps together in some ways. So thank you so much for sharing this, and feel free to continue to add, and we will share this with you. And this leads very well into you know, my next part, which is talking about what OMAFRA CED is doing. And I'll first start just by saying, you know, as a you know, as the Ontario Public Service, as OMAFRA, you know, at the much higher levels, you know, we have very strong anti-racism policies, hiring practices, and, you know, you know, the corporate structure is embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion and anti-racism in its own policies, right? That trickle down to all of us and to where we work in the CED unit. So I wanted to take a few minutes just to talk about some of the things that we're doing internally, some of the things, you know, yeah. So some of the things that we're doing internally, and this I'm going to speak directly about our CED, our Community Economic Development Unit. So we have, one of the things that we did and spent a lot of time on is we created a very intentional diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism action plan for our team. So, you know, getting back to that concept of planning and really kind of laying out what this journey might look like. You know, and then one of the objectives, like, we've spent a lot of time also developing an operational plan, and one of the objectives in our operational plan was very deliberate, and it's to be anti-racist and continue to build and support a culture of inclusivity and reconciliation internally and externally. So, you know, we've voiced it, we talk about it, we have monthly meetings, we have quarterly meetings, you know, and speaking to that education education. There are opportunities within our branch and our division to do book clubs and podcast clubs and things like that. And there's constant sort of conversation happening internally. And, like my personal goal, if I'm not in charge of anything, but my personal goal is that I want this to be on the top of everyone's desk and not on the side of everyone's desk. So, what motivates me the most is that I have colleagues who can't be themselves and bring their full selves to work every day, and that they have elements of fear when they come to work. That's what I would like to see change. So the other thing that we're doing, we're looking at adapting our programming to reflect a DEI component. And so we've been working on, like, I think many of you will be familiar with our First Impressions Community Exchange, for example. And we have developed a set of questions that are focused on DEI, and that we're hoping that our next First Impressions Community Exchange set of communities will pilot for us, because we need to see whether these questions are going to work or not. And the other thing that we're doing, we're in the process of, and we should have done by the end of this year, is we're working on a set of draft questions for our BRNE, Business Retention and Expansion Program. And again, we would be looking for a community moving forward, once we have them finalized internally, to pilot those questions and just to see how they're working. And then we're also happy to share those out to other folks. If you're not, going to use our particular BRNE program, that we would be happy to share our thoughts around that. Another sort of more significant project that we're doing, I should say, where we're looking at how we can adapt programming, we will be looking at downtown revitalization, and also looking at it with the DEI lens. One of the other sort of more significant projects that we're going to be working on is looking at about 10 years ago, we developed a toolkit called Community Immigrant Retention in Rural Ontario. And it was piloted in 3 communities at the time. And then it really, I'm sad to say that it took a back seat, but it's very much on the forefront now. And it is one of the projects that we're going to be looking at moving forward, and looking at some ideas on how that can be broadened as a toolkit for communities in DEI. So stay tuned for that. It's going to take us some months to get through that, but again, it's some of the work that we're doing internally. As we've devoted a teeny tiny summit to include DEI, which is today. And thank you for being here today. And then we're going to be starting our rounds of Community Economic Development 101, and some of you will be familiar with those. We'll be doing the rounds across, like in the East, Central, and Western Ontario, and virtually as well. We're incorporating DEI content into that offering. So those are some of the things that we're working on, and just day-to-day intention to be true to our framework, our own diversity and equity and inclusion and anti-racism framework, and continue to support each other and our communities in moving forward with creating a space where everyone feels welcome. Does anyone have any questions on this before we move on? Feel free to pop in the chat, or
yeah, I haven't seen any in the chat yet, other than one asking about CIRO. So it's Community Immigrant Retention in Rural Ontario Guidebook. That was
right.
what that
Okay, yeah,
is?
sorry for the acronyms, you know, they fall off our lips so easily because we use them every day, and yeah. And you know, I'm happy to you know, have, like, if you have any questions, I'm happy to have a conversation with you. You know, I'm on a learning journey, as we all are, and you know, it's you know, that journey can be made easier when it's shared, I think. And also, you know, stay tuned, because we're looking at ways moving forward that we can bring communities together, just, you know, in a similar format to this, you know, just to maybe talk about success stories. You know, people can share where they're, you know, maybe seeing some pushback and how others overcame that kind of thing. So, you know, we're going to be uh, working on this. You know, as you can see from the diagram on the last slide, it's a journey, and it's one that really doesn't have a conclusion. You know, it's just a cycle of, you know, we incorporate, we understand, we learn, we unlearn, we understand, we incorporate, and we keep thinking about how it's going, and what's working and what's not. So anyway, so we'll be talking about this more, and hopefully you know, having a more just sharing type of environment coming soon. So my goodness, I'm like on time. That's crazy.
Well, you're a minute
Anyway.
over. You were close to getting muted, Karen, but because I work with you every day, I let you go a minute extra.
Oh, thanks, Carolyn. Carolyn's tough. She's tough, but it is hard to facilitate yourself. So, so, you know, one of the things, like, we're really excited to hear from our 4 speakers this morning, and Pam earlier gave us a bit of a snapshot of who they are and who they represent. And I'm really excited. I have spoken with, I think, most of the speakers, and it's really exciting to hear sort of what people are doing, and the strides that they're making in their own communities, you know, larger and smaller. So I am, our first speaker is Hilary Janot from the municipality of North Grenville. Welcome, Hilary. And we'll let you take it away. And I believe Hilary's going to share her screen.
Okay, thank you so much, Karen. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm just going to make it bigger there. Just let me know if you're having any
Looks
issues
great.
seeing that. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I'm just going to move your beautiful faces. There we go. Okay, so good morning, everyone. And I want to say thank you to the organizers for preparing this session. I'm really excited about this topic and very grateful to speak about some related efforts I've been working on. As was mentioned, my name is Hilary Janot, and I'm the Director of Corporate Services for the municipality of North Grenville. And I'm presenting to you on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe, and we honor the historic relationship of the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat peoples to this land as well. So for those that aren't familiar with North Grenville, it is a community of 17,964 people. So we're not quite teeny tiny, but we're no big city either. We're fortunate to have challenges with being too small to be big, but also too big to be small sometimes. We're also a good mix of urban and rural, which provides a lot of interesting opportunities and challenges at times. North Grenville has experienced high growth with 9.2% population growth from 2016 to 2021. And we're also experiencing consistently high growth. So in the previous census cycle, we also saw growth by 9.1%. Location-wise, we're just south of Ottawa, located on the beautiful Rideau River and along Highway 416. Our new community strategic plan was actually just adopted in January after extensive public engagement, and it kind of situates some of the rest of what I'll be talking about later today. A lot of the values of EDI are actually embedded in this plan, as Karen was mentioning, so we're really seeing that top-down initiative through the plan. Two of the pillars include diverse and resilient economic development and being a caring community. And within that caring community pillar, actions include evaluating policies from an equity, diversity, and inclusion perspective, completing a reconciliation framework, and increasing engagement with equity deserving groups. And two of my current projects, as was mentioned, include creating an economic development strategy and developing an equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy, which I guess is why I was asked to speak today. And as well, I know DEI is kind of the term we've been using. EDI is ingrained in my mind, so if I slip into using EDI, please do not mind that. Both of these projects are at similar places. We've completed initial stakeholder engagement, and we will be moving into public consultation phases in the new year. So our first EDI initiatives were actually ignited because a local business owner was asking what our policies were around creating safe places and ensuring equity in the community. And we said, you know, you're right. We as staff know we won't support inappropriate activities, but we haven't actually made that clear through policies. So that launched the creation of what I call the 3 Fs, which are funding, flags, and facilities policies, which all state we won't support discriminatory actions with municipal resources. Once we had these policies in place, we realized we needed more than that. We needed a publicly driven strategy that guides how the municipality will actually action our EDI values. So it's been a pretty interesting process creating this EDI strategy concurrently with the economic development strategy. There's been a number of connections and lessons learned while working through the two. 3 significant ones I wanted to touch on today are transit, physician attraction, and youth retention and attraction. I think each is an example of how EDI and economic development are entwined. And I think that even if your community is teeny tiny, each of you are likely asked to address these in some way in your communities at some point. With regards to transit, I actually recently attended a working session held by the St. Lawrence Rideau Immigration Partnership, which is our local immigration partnership. And I know we have a speaker speaking to that next, but if you're not connected with your local LIP, I highly suggest you do so. And at this session, transit was recurringly one of the top issues when talking about newcomer attraction. With regards to economic development, simply people need to be able to get to work. We also recently completed a transit study, and the feedback we received about the importance of having transit access to be able to access work and services was eye-opening. And if your community is too small to support a transit system, you may want to consider how people can otherwise safely get to work, whether by foot, bike, whatever that may be. In North Grenville, our commercial hub lies along County Road 43, which is a 2-lane highway with essentially no sidewalk. It is actually the most traveled county road in the county, and it breaks my heart when I see people walking along it. Oftentimes they're in uniform, heading to work, and often they are part of an equity-seeking group, whether they're young, have a mobility aid, or are racialized. One of my other portfolios is primary care. Like every community, I'm sure on this call, we have a need for more family doctors, which is something people certainly consider when they're looking to relocate to a new community. One of the areas of opportunity we have identified is that international medical graduates who accept a residency position in Canada must provide 5 years of full-time service in an eligible community in Ontario. And that is most communities outside of the larger ones like Ottawa, Toronto, Pickering, Markham, Brampton, Mississauga, and such. At our stakeholder table, where we're discussing primary care, we've discussed wanting to take advantage of this incentive, but we recognize that we have to have welcoming communities in order to keep these doctors here past those 5 years. They need to feel safe, they need to feel welcome, and they need to feel connected. And again, people won't want to relocate to a community if they do not have access to a family doctor. We've also seen increasingly more opportunities with regards to students and youth attraction. Even at the municipal office alone, we've seen a huge increase in the number of students seeking opportunities, and we're finding they're often very diverse with diverse backgrounds. I also taught at St. Lawrence College from 2018 to 2020. And just as a little anecdotal evidence, in 2018, I had 10 students, none who were international students. In 2019, I had 20 in my class and 2 were international students. And in 2020, right before the pandemic struck, I had 42 students and 32 were international students. That is a huge increase. So I think there's a gigantic opportunity here as we experience labor shortages, and these students are often very eager to get more experience working in Canada. In addition, the federal government just removed the cap on off-campus work hours until the end of 2023 for international students. I know many of you don't have post-secondary schools in your communities, but neither do we. Outside of hosting placements at our municipal office, our economic development strategy looks at how we can work with certain sectors and partner with education programs to draw youth here. Again, our workplaces and communities must be welcoming, safe places to attract and retain these young people. My CAO, Gary Dyke, always reminds us that everything we do is economic development. And I like to think that we need to recognize that everything we do has to be looked at from an EDI perspective, because it's vital to be creating safe and welcoming communities. To me, this is a moral imperative, but thinking more practically, there's many reasons why integrating EDI and economic development are advantageous for communities. Firstly, we need to provide residents the services and amenities they are demanding. With labor shortages we are facing, we need to ensure that everyone who wants to work has an opportunity to do so. And we need to ensure that everyone who wants to open a business sees that they have the opportunity to do so as well. And that can also come from just ensuring we are showing representation in the business community and supporting the business community. Similarly, like many rural communities, we heavily rely on our residential tax base, but as we continue to grow, we have increasing infrastructure costs. So again, we need to be sure we're supporting and encouraging an environment where anyone can add to our commercial and service offerings. And I think one of the most important reasons is that youth are going to be simply demanding this. Just yesterday, a 13-year-old reached out to me asking what the municipality's policies were with regards to gender neutral washrooms. I know when I was 13, my main concern was what I was wearing to school the next day. So it's really amazing to see the innovative forward thinking of the youth that are coming up in this next generation. The next generation will simply not look for work, go to school, visit, or want to live in communities that aren't on board with upholding the values of EDI. And that's all I have. Again, very thankful for the opportunity to speak to you all, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Hillary. I love, conceptually that everything we do as a municipality is economic development. You know, it's kind of one of the things that we've been very strong on over the years, and our CED programs try to embody that. And I think you hit some really key things. I also love the fact, and we talked before, I love the fact that North Grenville has really taken this seriously, and it is embedded, and it's also outwardly supportive of groups within the community who are also trying to work within the DEI framework. So that's really great. Thank you. So we're going to hear from all of the speakers, and then we're going to open up for questions for all after. So we're going to, Mark was not able to join us today, Mark Nonks from Huron County Immigration Partnership. So he did take some time and share with us his story, his organization's story. So we're going to hear from him now.
So, Mark, what does DEI look like in your community?
Right. So DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is something that our county is still working towards, like everywhere else. We know that we have challenges here, like everywhere else. Last year, we commissioned a study. I work for the local immigration partnership, and we commissioned a study with Western University. And I'll just share my screen. There we go. We called over 500 people who fit into 3 different categories: immigrants, invisible minorities, Indigenous peoples, and white non-immigrants. And we asked them about their experiences with discrimination. And people self-identified whether or not they had experienced discrimination in the last 3 years. And so you can see from this graph that quite a significant population, or percentage of the population of Indigenous peoples and immigrants and visible minorities reported experiencing discrimination. And when we asked them why they believed they had received discrimination, it was due to a visible part of themselves. Whereas white non-immigrants, it may have been another thing that was related to them, but not necessarily their skin color or their ethnic identity. So that kind of prompted us to host a series of presentations where we presented the results of our survey and have community conversations about, how can we address this? One of the places that was identified where discrimination most frequently takes place is in workplaces. And so, you know, whether that's from a colleague or a supervisor, or working with the customers. We also noticed that it was happening in stores and restaurants and retail spaces. The conversations kind of led us to realize that a lot of people thought we weren't really that diverse here. And, you know, there was an invisibilization of people of color, of immigrants and Indigenous peoples, because we are predominantly a white non-immigrant area, which has less than 10% of our population is immigrants, which is in drastic comparison to our urban counterparts, where 20 to 30% of the population will be immigrants. So that led us to come up with a few campaigns. One of our campaigns was called Welcoming Communities, and I'll share my screen again. And that was a campaign that really highlighted ways that we can be more welcoming as a community. So we identified 4 key actions that people can take to just start the conversation. So a smile is the same in every language. Friendship starts with a few kind words. A simple conversation can have a big impact. And a wave hello can go a long way. You know, this is the first step to welcoming and then towards making people feel like they belong in our communities. So that's from a public facing point of view, how we're addressing DEI as a local immigration partnership. Huron County has also hired its first diversity, equity, and inclusion officer earlier this year, and that's something that has been prioritized by our council as something we need to focus on going forward.
And I see that you've got a stories tab. So what sort of stories did you start to share? As part of this
so
program?
We started sharing stories of people who own businesses in our communities, and they will highlight how they came to this area and why they chose this area. So we've got, for instance, a couple that have, and they're actually not a couple, they're cousins, which was an assumption I made. So these cousins opened a restaurant outside of Bayfield earlier this summer, and they had moved, she had moved directly from India and he was American based. And so they had opened a restaurant. Again, here's another example of a woman from the Philippines who opened a restaurant, and a couple from Pakistan who started a hotel and motel took over a hotel and motel in Goderich. So these were all examples of how people were making business within our communities, and were willing to share their stories because they saw it as an advertising opportunity for them, but also a way to, we saw it as a way to break down some of the invisibility that people faced. We focused on social media and we put advertising money behind these posts, about $35, but the results were amazing. So you can see there's 240 likes there. On that post here, 273 likes. This post, 42 likes, wasn't as big a hit as the others. The reach was over 10,000 on most of those posts. So that was really, really great. We also partnered with a tourism publication that's local. It's called Stops Along the Way. So it wasn't only featured in digital format, but also in print format. And their publication has over 10,000 copies that's distributed throughout the area.
That's really neat to see the results, and the shares were incredible on those. Your analytics there were great. So what sort of impact has this work had on economic development in your community? So tying back the work you're doing, the local immigration partnership, and the stories you're telling. So how has that impacted economic development in Huron County?
Yeah, you know, a couple of goals. We wanted to help these businesses attract more attention and, advertise for themselves. So we did hear back once we plugged in these advertisements that they got a bump, and they had customers telling us that they had seen their ad and they want new customers were coming in the doors. We also wanted to, and this is a longer term goal, make this area seem more attractive for other immigrants who are looking to set up businesses in our community. So it's a recruitment strategy for business owners and entrepreneurs. So those were the two main goals. And then the third goal was to break down this wall of, white non-settlers and us being a homogenous community in this area, which we certainly aren't.
For sure. And I think the tactics you're using are very accessible for any community to approach. Is there, from a county perspective, can you just talk about, and sorry, I hadn't floated this question ahead of time with you, but can you talk about sort of what the community commitment is from the county, and is it part of your strategic plan for a county, or sort of how is it embedded within the work you're doing?
I can't talk about it from Huron County's perspective, but I can talk about it from the local immigration partnership. And it certainly is a cornerstone and a foundation of the work that we do, where we're trying to take this lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion into all the work that we're doing. And we're asking for community feedback before we start projects so that people are embedded within the work as we go along and roll it out. So not doing work on behalf of a group, but doing it with a group of people who we aim to work further with and promote further inclusion with.
Yeah, for sure. So a real community economic development type approach where you're working with the group and as part of the decision making. Well, that was wonderful, Mark. Thanks for sharing your story today. We really appreciate you taking time and accommodating us to fit your schedule and be part of our Teeny Tiny Summit today.
Great. Thanks so much.
That was great. And it almost felt like he was right here. So, one of the things that Mark brought up, not only that they're very deliberate in the work that they're doing, but also, the struggle for, and we did hear this through the project we did in the summer, the struggle that sometimes councils see or community members, have in actually identifying that their population is not necessarily homogeneous anymore, and that there's not a recognition that there's even a need for building some kind of DEI framework because they're not seeing that diversity within amongst their community members. But it's like, on saying that, it's really important to think about folks who, because the community may or may not be a safe space for them. So there may be a lot of people in a community that, don't identify and don't step forward or speak out, because it's not a safe community to be in. So, I think we need to kind of get past that way of thinking, or help our leaders get past that kind of thinking, so that we can truly move forward authentically. So our next speaker is Jimmy Cote, and we had the pleasure of speaking with the mayor, and as mentioned earlier, Jimmy is the CAO of Valrita. And Jimmy, I'll let you take the floor. Or the screen.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good morning. I just want to acknowledge that the land the municipality of Valrita operates today is on Treaty 9 territory, traditional homelands of the Ojibwe, Chippewa, Ojibwe, Mushkegowuk Cree, Muscree, Algonquin, and the Métis people. Good morning. My name is Jimmy Cote. I am the CEO of the municipality of Valrita Hardy. For those of you not aware of where or who Valrita is, Valrita Hardy is a small municipality of around 800 residents in Northern Ontario. We're also known as a sister or bedroom community to Kapuskasing, which is the closest bigger center to us. I am proud to call Valrita my home. I can see firsthand the municipality operations, the project services improvements, proceed with the alignment with the strategic vision that we do have here in Valrita. Working close with the mayor, like she mentioned, council and my staff, it is our job to ensure that the council goals, objectives are achieved. By doing this, we realize this by managing the daily operation service delivery, leading the ongoing improvements with a goal of a greater efficiency. Sorry, you're going to notice my French coming in here and there, but don't mind it. A greater efficiency, as well as the development, recommendation, implementation of certain policies. So just to talk a little bit more about today for diversity, equity, inclusion, what it means. Here in Valrita, this year, EMO in the province, and they were reaching out to communities to see if any communities could step in and become host communities for the Bay James evacuations, whether it's floods, fire season. So Valrita became the smallest community to become a host. We had the pleasure to have the community of Kasheshawan First Nation. We welcomed them here in the month of May for 4 to 6 weeks. That was a big step for us. It was a big project for a small community like ours to step in and be able to help out. You may ask, economic development, having Indigenous or First Nations coming into Valrita. So for us, the main reason that we went aboard and did this was when we approved our strategic plan not too long ago. One of the big the values that we set into the strategic plan, one of them was the inclusiveness, teamwork, and also transparency, which I believe is really, really important. Communication is always number one. The focus area we had in the strategic plan was the reconciliation. And I believe that was one of the important focus areas or the pillars, because it was to establish and maintain a respectful relationship between the municipality and the Indigenous communities that we can support with this. To make sure that we can accomplish this, we are developing and we will be implementing a truth and reconciliation strategy for the municipality. So we may work together and repair some of the harm that was caused with the residential schools. And we also want to develop meaningful and also respectful relationships with these communities. I think partnership and working together, teamwork, those are big words for me. We do have a few partnerships with the Kapuskasing Indian Friendship Center, not too far. We have a partnership with the Moose Cree First Nation. We work closely with Muskekawak Council and Métis Nation of Ontario and Cochrane. We have a few joint initiatives. So for me, it was important for the municipality to step in and do a role in welcoming these community here in Valrita Hardy. We had a slide earlier today, and we had a few the tools that we use. So in Valrita, I like to give staff council workshops. I believe it's really, really important for us to be educated about whether this time was the First Nation. We are in a Francophone community. We are seeing a lot of people moving to Valrita in the region from Southern Ontario or moving in from Eastern part of the world. So for us, it was important to have some workshops available, not just for staff, but for council also. So we can have a better education of the reality of other, whether it is Indigenous, age, socioeconomic, whatever it is. We want to make sure that we are ready, we are prepared, and we're ready to help these communities out. An action activity that demonstrate the commitment to DEI, like I mentioned, we do have a strategic plan. We do have a pillar, which is inclusiveness. So for us, how do we work with the Economic Development Corporation to attract, or most importantly, retain people that might be moving from other bigger centers and whatnot? So we do work closely with local businesses to support them in their needs. We have some grants available. we put in place not too long ago a community improvement plan, CIP package to attract and retain newcomers to our municipality. With that CIP package, like I said, I think it's important to attract new people to our community. So we have identified 16 lots within the municipality. This was a strategy that was used by Smooth Rock Falls, which is another township not too far from us, which they were really successful. So we did the same thing here in Vallarta Hardy. So we identified 16 lots that were available within the town limits. Those lots were all serviced, ready to go. And the CIP pretty much was you can buy a piece of property here in Vallarta Hardy for $1,000. You would have 2 years to build, and then you would have a tax rebate of 3 years. So year one was 100%, year two was 60, and year three is 40%. So full taxes were being paid on year number 4. We also waived the construction permit and whatnot. So we are really trying to figure out a way to attract people within the municipality and make them feel comfortable. If we go back to one of the first terms that I mentioned, was teamwork, and communication. Communication and transparency is really important also when you are, whether it's, like I mentioned, different race, ethnicity, gender, whatever it could be, sexual orientation, disability, religion. It's really important to have an open ear. So ever since I became CEO here in Vallarta Hardy, so it's been 2 years. We do have, let's say when a big decision is made, so the strategic plan, well, we made sure to include 2 community discussions before putting everything in forth. So everybody was welcome to the community center. No judgment. Every question was a good question. So for us, it was really important to hear from our residents, to see how they felt about these decisions. How can we improve? Have we missed something? How do you guys feel? We have municipal events. We have one coming up in Christmas, and once again, there's going to be an open discussion with the new mayor and new council to see priorities. What does the resident of Vallarta Hardy want to see in our community? So without this, it would be impossible for us to give an ear and listen and to know exactly what people are looking for. The DEI, so we do not currently have a diversity, equity, inclusion policy. We are working on one. So what we're doing, we do partnerships of 4 small communities. Like I mentioned, we are rather small, close to 800. We have 4 sister communities, I'd say all within 100 kilometers, that are also in the same range. I'd say 400 to 800. So there's a partnership. We developed not too long ago a safety and wellness strategy again with these 4 communities. So we will be doing the same to develop the EDI, just to make sure that cross your T's, dot our I's. We want to make sure that people feel comfortable in our community. That's the number one thing. Like I mentioned, partnership is a big one for us. There is a organization. It's called Réseau du Nord. So it is a French. It's a Northern Ontario Francophone Immigration Support Network. So what this group does, or the main goal of this, is to increase the number of French-speaking immigrants, to increase the demographic weight, of course, of the Francophone community here in Northern Ontario. They want to make sure that the social, cultural integrity of the French-speaking immigrants within Canada, especially here in Northern Ontario. So for us, we also partner up for different workshops, activities in the community where we open our doors. We do have a few Ukrainian families right now in Vallarta that are here on well, hopefully they can fall in love with Vallarta and stay here. But so it's really that's one of the ways with these partnerships that we were able to go and get a little bit more people within Vallarta. The challenge, you might ask, well, of course, it's housing, like it is everywhere else. So we do have some lots available for purchase. Well, thing is, a few years back, you can have a really nice house in Vallarita for $100,000. Nowadays, you're gonna double, triple that pretty easily. So it's we're trying to figure out a way that we can help out our residents and purchase, build, and of course attract, retain our residents here in our region. I think I went pretty much over everything I wanted to bring up today. Like I said, the two main things that we are working on right now, of course, is the host community and our partnerships with the University of Hearst, which have a lot of students, international students. And for us, it's all about the inclusiveness and keeping track of the strategic plan that was put in place for a reason, working with council and make sure that everything in there is being established here in the municipality.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. There's so many things that resonate here. The importance of partnerships. You've embedded inclusivity in your strategic plan, and you're working regionally to create a DEI strategy moving forward. So, those are really great, tactics to employ. The concept of using your CIP to create some housing options to attract folks to come and live and stay in your community is really quite innovative. And I'm sure people are going to want to learn a little bit more about that in particular. And your focus on reconciliation and working closely with the Indigenous communities near you, is also something. When we did interviews, one of the things that we also learned is that, and again, we spoke mostly with staff. And one of the things that they said is, there again is not a real recognition or commitment to Indigenous communities, groups, organizations within their boundaries, and that was an area that they were going to try and focus on, at least in their first steps in DEI. So again, I suspect your community and the work that you're doing, you may have some sort of tactics to share with folks on how you are deliberately doing that. So thank you for sharing. Thank you so much. And I love that Vallarita Hardy is a community of 800, and the regional communities that you're working with are, very teeny tiny, between 400 and 800 population. So you're really sort of raising the bar for what can be done in our teeny tiny communities. So thank you for that. So our last but not least speaker of the group is AJ Adams. And AJ, I'm really looking forward to hearing you share your story, and take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Karen. I will share my screen here. Okay. So thank you for having me today. My name is AJ Adams, pronouns he, him. I wear a lot of hats, but we'll go with rural and small town 2S LGBTQIA+ advocate. So I am broadcasting, I guess is a word here, from my home in Stratford, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, also known as the people of the Longhouse and the Anishinaabe. The land that I'm living in and work in is subject to Treaty Number 29, as well as the Dish with One Spoon Wampum. So who am I? Why am I here? So I am a communications professional and social change advocate. I do a lot of community work in the EDI space, rural EDI space, primarily around gender and sexual diversity, which is just another way of saying 2S LGBTQIA+ or queer. So I wear a lot of hats, as you can see in the bullet points there, but I'm primarily speaking today wearing my hat of president and board chair of Stratford Perth Pride. And just to give some context of Stratford Pride, so we are a incorporated nonprofit founded in 2017 that serves the city of Stratford, town of St. Mary's, and the 4 lower tier municipalities of Perth County. So we work with 7 different municipalities in total to advance 2S LGBTQIA+ work in our communities through education, events, programming, advocacy, and so on. So one of the unique pieces that I kind of bring to this space is in 2020, I conducted a research study on the importance of pride in rural Ontario. So that was a basic survey, if you will, with over 300 people completing the survey with representation from 95 rural communities across the province. Every pocket of the province, thankfully, was represented, and folks from different socioeconomic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, citizenship and newcomer backgrounds as well. And part of this conversation about economic development, as was said by Hillary earlier, everything is economic development. So these are some of the facts I think might be relevant to all you folks. So according to the research that I did, 87% of rural queer Ontarians have experienced some form of hate speech. Majority of those occurrences happen in the workplace, with the second highest rate happening on the street. Primarily when same-sex couples hold hands is what the qualitative piece of that research found. And since Pride was created, and what I mean by that is it could be as simple as raising a flag to having some kind of picnic in the park event, or having a full, if you will, Pride organization. So since Pride in any form was created in that rural community, 33% of queer folks believe that hate speech has decreased, and 60% of them believe that they feel more supported in their communities. So feeling more supported, I've heard people talk a lot about community and safety well-being plans. Just the presence of pride, which again can be as simple as raising a flag, makes 60% of your residents and citizens feel more supported. And 97%, so nearly 100% of rural queer Ontarians believe that pride, again, in any form, is needed in rural Ontario. So not wanted, but needed. So as someone who leads a pride organization, that's very reassuring for the work that I do. So why should y'all actually care about this? So queer people love to shop. I know it's a stereotype, but we like shopping. So for fast-moving consumer products alone, so those are things like groceries, beauty products, pet food, alcohol, office supplies, LGBTQ plus people spent $3.7 billion in 2018, which represents 4.4% of Canada's total purchases in that category. And queer people spend more on average in some areas than others. So we go to beauty stores, pet stores, drugstores, office supply stores, I love Staples, and alcohol more than the general population. So maybe a possible idea is for your municipality or community organization to create community and tourism-based experience surrounding things like beauty or pets or alcohol. When I lived in Toronto, there was a outdoor pet festival or dog festival. It was primarily queer people I saw there. It was kind of like an unofficial secondary pride event. So that's something your teeny tiny communities could look at as well. Queer-owned businesses. So a lot of people kind of don't really think about who actually owns businesses, but 1 in 40 businesses in Canada are majority owned or operated by queer people, generating approximately $22 billion in 2019. 78% of those who were surveyed in this report, 78% of employees at queer-owned businesses were queer themselves. And queer-owned businesses also, according to this report, are more likely to have different marginalized people work in their businesses. So whether that's race background, if they have a disability, Indigenous, and of course queer themselves. So supporting queer-owned businesses is not just helping a business, it's actually creating a safe space and more importantly, a safe work environment for folks. So making sure that you have some kind of entrepreneurship program or training program for queer-owned businesses. Queer-owned businesses do also earn less than non-queer businesses. That's primarily because queer-owned businesses are sole proprietorships. It's mostly folks, actually like myself, who do consulting or freelance work. So that's why it's not tons and tons of money. But I know here in Stratford, there's several queer-owned restaurants and clothing stores as well. So although there is an increasing number of same-sex partners since the legalization, which is fair to say, of same-sex marriage occurred in this country, and more queer couples are having children, the vast majority of queer couples are dual income, no kids. So this very simple way, and I'm sure all you economic people know this, when you don't have kids, you have more disposable income because kids cost a lot. So finding ways that you can attract couples to things. So whether that's your local residents or from a tourism point of view, having kind of date nights. And again, a lot of queer people have a dog or a cat. So again, that pet theme. Again, might be a bit of stereotyping, but there's a little truth to it. And then there's a thing what I call the Schitt's Creek effect. So if you don't know Schitt's Creek, it's an insanely good show, Canadian made. It's won all the Emmys. So it's about a rich family who loses their money and moves to the fictional town of Schitt's Creek. So it is filmed here in Ontario, primarily in the very rural hamlets of Goodwood and Hockley Valley. I actually lived in Goodwood for 5 years, so I find it really funny whenever I watch the show. The show has a huge fan base and a very dedicated fan base. And the show has super positive queer themes and queer representation. So because of that, they have a lot of 2S LGBTQ people who are dedicated to the show. So fans are driving hours, people are renting a car if they live downtown Toronto to literally go see an intersection. So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, those 3 buildings are the exterior shots of the show, but people are driving that. So what this has created is a bit of a movement in that road trip staycation type travel among the queer community. So trying to find ways from an economic development and a tourism point of view to try to target queer couples or queer friend groups to come up to your small towns. So if you represent a community that is that CBC show, that Hallmark show or movie type community, try a little bit of queer targeted tourism. I'm not going to go over it for time, but Stats Canada last month actually released a new report on labor and economic characteristics of lesbian, gay, and bisexual people. So if you are interested to learn more about what the Canadian landscape looks like in terms of that breakdown, I highly recommend reading that. So what can all of your municipalities actually do? So Pride flags and visuals. I labeled this as idea number 0 because this is a super easy thing that folks can do. But unfortunately, a lot of municipalities and businesses and any organization stops at raising a pride flag. Make sure you're doing more than that, and I'll talk about some other ideas. One idea is doing what St. Mary's, Ontario did. So St. Mary's is a town here in Perth County of about 6,000 people. So what they did was created a downtown banner program. So it's one street, it's about 4 blocks is their downtown. So there's 12 progress flag banners that fly from beginning of May to the end of October. And for Pride Month, an additional 18 banners are put up as well. And those additional banners are the trans flag, the queer people of color, the Two-Spirit flag, non-binary, etc. So the town of St. Mary's actually paid for the entire project. So for 30 banners, this is about $3,000. Stratford Perth Pride came in as kind of like a consultant on it to pick banners and locations and all that. So that was a really, for myself, moving way to see how a municipality can support Pride in a rural community. And on this note too, there were several TikTok videos that went viral about the banner project, and people were coming from Toronto just to see the banners. So that's another way that you can attract folks from a tourism point of view. Sponsorship, this is 3 points here. I'll let you read the screen. But prides, even nonprofits, need money to operate. So make sure that your municipality is funding prides, whether that's just a small donation here and there, partnering with them to host events. Stratford Perth Pride pays about $2,000 for liability insurance alone each year. So that's a huge chunk of change that could go towards creating resources in education. So just finding ways that you can work better with prides and making sure that it's more than just the month of June as well. So show some pride in your advertisements. So 70% of queer people admit that they are positively influenced by ads that contain queer representation. So some ways that your municipalities could do this is by putting same-sex couples or people who are visibly gender diverse or not visibly gender diverse in things like tourism campaigns, on your social media and print and digital advertisements, on photos, info packages, toolkits, brochures. I'm sure most of your municipalities have things like rec guides. Put a same-sex couple on the front of the rec guide. And use local queer people as well. For all of us teeny tiny communities, the queer community, we all know each other. So there's a good chance we can validate your choice of people on the cover, and make sure you're doing this for more than just Pride Month. 3 other ideas, and feel free to reach out to me after this presentation if you want to go through any of these. Use pronouns everywhere throughout your municipality, both from an internal and external point of view. Make sure you have ongoing and regular education and training, not just onto us LGBTQI plus work, but EDI as a whole, and make sure you're looking at it from an intersectional lens. And review and modify policies and documents on things as simple as gender neutral language. And closing thought, you don't need to understand queer things. We can teach you the things. We can teach you knowledge. You just need to respect and support queer things, because we can't teach kindness and love. And that is my presentation.
Thank you so much, AJ. That was actually a beautiful finish. I love that quote. And can we attribute it to you? Yes.
Sure, go for it.
Okay. And you know, you talked, wow, so many things, and encouraging communities to take that, you know, that first step, and, you know, then to start thinking about how this can become, you know, and I think it's in alignment a little bit with me talking about side of the desk versus this is our day-to-day, right? And, you know, I think that's, you know, critically important in being able to, you know, do this work authentically, right? As a community, as an organization, as an individual. So thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you everyone for your presentation. We do have a couple of questions, I think, here. And I have a few that I would like to ask. We have a bit of time to speak to them. So there was a question here for you, Hillary, specifically, are you seeing trends that other municipalities are putting this kind of emphasis on DEI, and did your council have to approve this work?
Yeah, thanks. I think it was actually Jeanette who asked the question. Hi, Jeanette. There she is. So I think more and more municipalities are, I think, especially in the bigger municipalities, and it's starting to trickle down to our smaller municipalities. And I think maybe even Carolyn could speak more to the work they've done and the research they've done on that. With regards to council approval, I actually just looked back. We didn't actually get like official council, you know, recommendation to move forward with the EDI initiative, but they were, one of our councilors is actually on the line today. Hi, Councillor Wilson. We're very supportive in encouraging staff to move forward with this initiative. And like I mentioned, it was embedded into the strat plan, and the basically directive has come down from the top leaders in that respect. So it was kind of nice in a way that it wasn't like an official, you know, you have to do this. It was kind of, we're all on board, we're all on the same page, let's just get it done.
Great, thanks, Hillary. You know, and I think, you know, from the perspective of the work that we've done so far, you know, we've seen, as I mentioned earlier, you know, we've seen that total disconnect between, you know, the municipality is not doing a thing, and there are all these groups within the community that are looking to do good work and raise awareness and educate and support you know, businesses and entrepreneurs and so on, and to make the community a place that they want to live and stay, or come to and stay. And so, you know, I think the more we see communities who are municipalities, I guess, who are, you know, sort of embedding this kind of work, the more and you know, those connections are going to be created, and it's going to, I think it's going to help when you talk about you know, because we also heard about sort of that resident population that has been pushing back. You know, they're afraid. We actually heard, you know, from one community that we spoke with, you know, that people are afraid that by welcoming newcomers, they're going to take away jobs, right? And so, you know, when you think about our workforce and growing our communities and our workforce, and you know, to AJ's point about Stats Canada, you know, they've come out with a lot of new stats about you know, newcomers, immigrants, and the growth of our population and where that's going to come from, right? So you know, we need to be very mindful that municipalities and communities and residents all need to be working together and sort of moving forward together. So I think to Hillary's point, we're going to see more and more where municipalities are taking more of a front seat, which is quite exciting, you know, and I'm happy to watch that progression. AJ, did you want to add anything? I know that was directed to Hillary, but you know, you're an organization that is outside of the municipality, right? Like you're a standalone, like you're not born of the municipality, so to speak, a committee of council in any way. And so are you finding that the Stratford and Perth municipalities and the region, the municipalities themselves are quite supportive?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it really depends on the municipality. So as I mentioned, we work with 6 lower single tier municipalities, and then the upper tier being the county of Perth. So the city of Stratford and the town of St. Mary's have been, like, ally is an understatement in some moments. Like, they are fully on board. Like, there's of course learning barriers for things. Stratford has recently hired 2 different EDI portfolios within the municipality. And there's a lot of partnership conversations with other EDI type roles in the community. So there's a lot happening here. But some of our more teeny tiny type communities, a lot of it has to do with capacity of the municipality. So West Perth, for instance, I've been chatting with some of the municipal staff. They're really on board, but trying to get the community as a whole on board is a little bit more difficult, just because it's Ontario's Bible Belt, if you will, kind of expands up into Perth County. So it's trying to find that connection between, and there's another comment in the chat here about the fear and the relationship between marginalized groups and certain societal institutions. So it's trying to break down those barriers and build that relationship when a lot of it has been strained over history. So it's trying to find those champions like in West Perth, so those staff, and trying to find ways that we can get momentum within the municipality. And a lot of it comes down to education. So I'm trying to work with our municipalities to say, hey, I would love to come to councils. As we all know, we just had elections, so there's no councils. So trying to come in and just do a high level, this is what it means to be LGBTQ in this municipality, and these are the experiences. So at least they have the education, and then it's a starting point for conversation.
Great, thank you. Jimmy, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that and the support from your council?
No, like I said, on my side, it was a lot about education, right? And getting council aboard. Luckily, the relationship I have with the mayor, we think alike, especially when it came to this. So to have an ally when I came to council was a great help. To show that the municipality that did have to step in and take an approach to this. So no, it was we had a good discussion about this, and we took action.
Great. Yeah, and you know, these are some great examples, perhaps particularly with Hillary and Jimmy, who are, you know, they are the municipality representing their municipalities. There's some great examples on how it can be done, and I'm sure it hasn't been an easy path necessarily at all times, but you know, the fact that we keep moving forward is what's really important. There was a question in the chat about the land, Jimmy, that was identified. Was it identified for commercial or business use, or was it strictly for housing?
Yes, it was with the residential, so it was identified for housing, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. There's another question here. In our community, there are groups, namely the 2S LGBTQIA+, and they're fearful of the church community, which makes the church community also afraid. How do we navigate this and come together? So any thoughts on that from our panel? Oh.
Karen,
Yes.
if other panel members might want to speak to it, but I could give you some examples from Minden Pride. And I might add that Minden Pride also, one of our main starts when we started it was economic development in our community. So that was a key factor in our cause. But one of the things that we did is work with the churches and members of the churches together to make sure that when we had our Pride events, we also had a church event as well. So our Pride events went all weekend, and we worked with particularly United and Anglican churches, but other churches as well, and members from other churches. But not only did we do a Pride service, which was amazing. I think it's still might be on YouTube, one of them. But what we also included in some of them was First Nations, the other religious denominations or communities. And so it was really important for us to show the diversity in our diversity. And so we had various understandings, I will say, and spiritual ideas coming together so we could understand that kind of diversity, not just within the LGBTQ2+ community, but also within our faiths and our understandings of each other. And I think that added to it and brought more people involved as well. It is a very difficult gap sometimes to create, and that's a very, very good question, but I think there's some examples out there how it can be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Anyone else want to tackle that one?
I'll just add to that, and I think Minden Hills is a great example of Pride. I've attended Minden Pride before. They're fantastic up there. Yeah, I would say too, it's because of the role that institutions like the church play in our rural communities. They are such important pieces. They often are food banks. They support homeless folks. They do all these different things. So there's this conversation I'm having with a lot of other rural prides of navigating those historic but also present day strained relationships between religious institutions and the queer community. So it's to Pam's point, I think municipalities can play a role, but definitely make sure that you are letting those who are from the marginalized community, whether it's 2S LGBTQ or another group, lead those conversations. So make sure so if they need a space to have a conversation, maybe the municipality can offer up their office or find ways like events to partner. I know on my board, there are some individuals who have survived conversion therapy. So us even floating the idea of having a Pride service is extremely troubling for them in discussion. So, but we also have a United Church who has a affirming church designation from the United Church, meaning they are 2S LGBTQ inclusive. So it's just a hard, to Pam's point, it's very hard to navigate. So whatever work you are trying to advance, especially if you have very prominent churches in your communities, just make sure you are centering marginalized voices in those conversations.
Yeah, great points, AJ. And you know, I have to believe that you know, keeping the communication, you know, the streams of communication and you know, regardless of some of the pushback that we're getting, but you know, keeping those lines of communication open, and you know, even getting an edge, you know, a toe in the door, right, is going to be progress. So you know, like I said at the beginning, this is hard, right? You know, it's a journey, and some places are we're all at different places. So, but I think it takes a concerted effort of pretty much everybody who's on this call, and, organizations, communities, municipalities, council members, the province, regions, etc. We all, and individuals, we all have a part to play in this. So, any other thoughts, Hillary or Jimmy? No. There's another question. What are some strategies that have worked to reach people that don't want to be educated?
I can offer some thoughts on that one. I think for me, what I just always remind myself is that the objective of our EDI initiatives is to build community while respecting differences, and that's the core of it. And as long as we remember that, I kind of use that as our guiding light. But at the same time, having EDI values embedded again from the top and having our leadership completely behind it, it kind of sends a signal that, this is where the ship is headed and you can either be on board or not, but this is where we're going. And I think a lot of the times these conflicts often center around specific events, whether it's, maybe a pride event or a cultural event that other people disagree with. But all of our residents have to live with each other, 365 days of the year. And they manage to do that for the most part. So trying to find some common ground, but also just saying we're moving ahead and creating safe spaces for those that are on board with us.
Great. Thanks, Hillary. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I can add something. I think back to centering marginalized voices, I think is super important in this too. So if you can get someone in the room, that's obviously a great step. But making sure that there are actual lived stories being shared from marginalized people. I've been in some like power privilege type workshops or anti-racism workshops that are led by white people. So it's doesn't have that same kind of connect, and sometimes even just having municipal staff who counselors or other folks within your municipal staff see every day or have regular communication with. There's just that, oh, they're just saying this because it's their job, versus bringing in an outside person to come in and share their stories of what it's like to be marginalized or from an equity deserving community. And Celeste, nothing for us without us is in the chat there. That's the perfect way of summing it up, is making sure that you are bringing marginalized voices. I'm also a huge advocate is pay people for sharing their trauma. So trauma can mean different things to different people. So if I've had homophobic experiences and you're asking me to come to talk to your council, make sure I'm compensated in some way, whether that's paying me as an individual or supporting the organization that I'm speaking from.
Thank you so much. Jimmy or Pam, do you want to add anything else?
I have a story going through my mind. Can I share it?
Of course.
It is about a Minden Pride, if I may, thank you. It's about Minden Pride Mobile. And there are two volunteers that take this mobile to rural stores, not surrounded by anything, just a rural store out there. And they asked the owner of the store permission to set out outside their store. And one of the owners was very hesitant to have the Pride Mobile outside of their store, but they conceded. And then they saw through the day all these people coming up, getting flags, and all the people it was bringing in, and everybody was all excited in this little rural community who knew. And later on that evening, the owner of the store brought her son over, who was gay, and was very excited about the integration, and just kind of opened that pressure cooker, if you will, and of welcoming into the community, into that little rural area. So I just wanted to share that story with you, and also just to, if I might just comment on Mark Notes, what he raised too in terms of the visible and invisible discrimination. We don't always see that. So how important it is to talk to people and each other, not knowing what all of our stories are. And that was, I think, really, really important. Some are visible, some are invisible, but we really need to know people as each other. So thank you for everybody. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. And I don't think there are other questions in the chat. Just a couple of comments. Representation truly matters. And, if I could just speak to that too, AJ, and to your point about, there are a lot of white folks around tables that are leading conversations, right? And, I struggle with this a little bit because that's me, and I work closely with my colleagues within our ministry, to try and keep the conversations alive, and to work through some of our discomfort on a regular basis. But I have no lived experience. And so I think there's a role for somebody like me too, because I think that I would like to consider myself as an ally, and I think allies are really important too, and we need to walk together to make our spaces better, right? So I just kind of carry on with that thought in my mind, and hopefully doing things like making progress. So anyway, on that note, thank you to everyone. We have to the panel, we probably have time, oh my gosh, for the first time in a few teeny tiny summits that we're actually going to get to our snapshots. So we have just a couple of things that we would like to highlight. And I must say, which I already have, I know, but thank you to the panelists for your contributions, and thank you for everybody online for your contributions as well. We will share the retro board, and please stay tuned, stay connected with us. Because there are going to be more things coming from us to see how we can support you in your journey. So I wanted to talk, so one of our first teeny tiny snapshot here is, All Welcome here is a BIPOC-led nonprofit organization focusing on anti-racism in Prince Edward County. And it has been an organization that has provided, they do different types of research, they advocate, they do education, and there are a lot of activities that they're involved in, and they're completely independent of council, the actual corporation of Prince Edward County. Anyway, doing some really great work, and sort of building their presence. And the other thing that they do is part of their mandate is to support businesses, businesses coming to the community, and assisting entrepreneurs get set up and to find their way around the municipality, whatever that might look like. And in building that rural network so that there are spaces that people can go to or be part of, that they're comfortable in. So another one I wanted to mention as well, and Hillary, I'm sure there's a connection between the municipality and North Grenville Pride, and it's an organization that supports the 2S LGBTQI plus community and their families in Kemptville region, like Kemptville, Oxford Mills, Merrickville, they're again trying to create a community that enables people to feel that belonging and connection, which I talked about at the beginning of the first session, how important that is. It's not just welcoming newcomers to our communities, but it's creating and building that feeling and sense of belonging and connection to the community. So it's so important to support groups like this. And Carolyn, do you want to take over for the last two?
Sure. This is more of a resource that you'll have the link when we share out the materials afterwards, but Dr. Wayne Caldwell had done kit or a presentation where he talks about some of the key pieces that municipalities can do in attracting and retaining immigrants. And I thought it was just a great resource. It had lots of good, it's got like some steps that communities can take. So this is a link that we'll share with everybody. He talks things about, working with your head, building and maintaining relationships, gaining political will, and involving newcomers as key players. So it's more of a resource that I wanted you to be aware of. I think we shared it last year when we did the welcoming newcomers, but I thought it was worth repeating because sometimes the research papers or that work that's done out there is hard to find. The second one is a similar type of, there's 10 or 9 different research papers here. Dr. Ryan Gibson also works within the Regional Economic Development Group at the University of Guelph, and his students have written papers on all these topics that are listed on the screen. And the link, which is in the slide and will be shared, it actually leads to a Dropbox, so you can just download all of these papers and see them. But I just thought, again, it had some great information that's easily available if you had some interest in this for your community and you wanted sort of a 2-page summary of the research that they had done. And that's what these students have created. And this is something I meant to share last time, but we ran out of time because we focused on volunteers. But I thought from the diversity and inclusion lens, it really talks about how do you capture some of those younger people that might want to volunteer within your community, but maybe they don't really know how. So I attended, as I said earlier today, the Ontario Business Improvement Association. So there's tips on, managing no-shows, things for young people, like making sure you offer food, over schedule, promote the volunteer activity as a way to reach their mandatory hours. They talked about supervision and including older supervisor in each zone and work to sort of gradual independence. So as you have volunteers over maybe their 4 years of high schools, they graduate into more supervisory roles. They talked about training and offering a fun night, offering food, make sure they know who to go to for help, have protocols developed that they can look at. They also talked about in distraction is even using phones and stuff as a way to gamify. So if you can track that you've emptied 10 garbage cans and cleaned up, that you can earn a prize, or using Snapchat to actually track those things. So it was kind of neat, the ideas that came out of the room that day. In summer months, they talked about using social media to grab them. And then a lot about what was talked about our last Teeny Tiny about matching those skills to volunteer passions. Find out what people care about and match them to those sorts of roles. So I will share this slide deck with everyone. As I sort of go on our next date, I wanted to invite Pam to just give a few, if you had any closing words, Pam. I know you wanted to give an opportunity to thank the speakers. We do have a date set for March 1st, and it's the importance of a plan for community vitality. Anybody who signed up for this one, you'll automatically get the information for our next session. But Pam, if you want to share, we'd be happy to hear from you as we close up.
Okay, thank you for that opportunity, Carolyn. But I think things have been really covered extremely thoroughly in these discussions and the questions that were there. And I the work that is being done in North Grenville, I had the opportunity to meet at the Plow Match, the Pride community there, as Roma had a booth right next to them, and we enjoyed that camaraderie. And some really very important points, including transit, how we integrate diversity into our development. I thought that was really important that Hillary was raising. And Mark and the work that he was raising in County of Huron, and how to welcome newcomers. I love the sharing the stories online. That was very inspiring, and it's marketing and it's diversity, and it's inspiring. It gave me some ideas, and I think too that Jimmy, he was bringing a lot of important strategic planning in such a small community. It was so exciting to hear, and it was just wonderful to hear the work that is being done there and that he is initiating, and the integration and understanding and dealing with climate change as part of that, which he didn't refer to it directly, but certainly around flooding and some of the changes that we're seeing, why this is so important to be looking outside of our own rural communities and integrating with other issues and other things happening around us in the world. It's was so critical and important to understand what we're doing and what First Nations are coping with. And so that was heartwarming from Jimmy. And of course, AJ, great strategy and information. And I wrote down the flags because our new CIO was from St. Mary, so I'm sure she's seen those flags before. I wrote down the amount, how many banners, and I'll be talking to AJ. So was wonderful presentations. And Karen, your overview and the work that you're collecting is so important to us at the municipal level. So I'm looking forward to this being shared, not just with all the nonprofit and other organizations and business groups here, but particularly with the municipalities, which I know Amafra will do. So great job. You did wonderful research, and thanks for bringing that team together.
Thank you for the closing words. And thank you everyone for joining. I know I ask a lot for the evaluation poll, but if you could provide the feedback, that is really important to us. So I appreciate, we will send the link in the follow-up email as well. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.